To be arrested in India for whatever crime, no matter whether you did it or not, whether you committed an iniquity or had broken the law, whether you were falsely accused or caught in the act, you were guilty until proven innocent. The result of the initial interrogation would be the same. Through their harsh third-degree interrogation method, the police would force you to admit to the charges of which you were suspected. They would make you sign your confession, and then the prosecutor would establish a case against you in court. Once again, if you paid your lawyer well, he could then bribe the judge handling your case, and whether you were guilty of a crime or innocent, you would be acquitted. From the time you were arrested until the final adjudication of the court could take years. You would be stuck in jail for years, beaten up every so often, and roughed up by other criminals and gondas. To escape imprisonment and beatings, you would need to bail yourself out and buy your freedom until trial. If you were rich enough, you could pay the huge amount of bail and save yourself a whole lot of trouble. If you were a foreigner and paid your bail, you would be forced to surrender your passport and attend every hearing required by the court. If you were Indian, you had to be present at all scheduled hearings and you could not travel out of the country. Hearings would take place every 3 to 4 months as a formality. The clerk would call out your name, and when you hear your name you would just need to hold up your right hand and shout "present" or "here" and stand up for the court to see you. Then, the judge would more than likely give you a disinterested glance and announce yet another day for the next hearing. After that, you would be free to go, only to present yourself in court again after other 3 or 4 months. Then you would have to do the same thing over again for the next assigned hearing date and leave again. This procedure would continue for 3 to 5 years. If you asked a lawyer or a policeman why it took so long for your case to get to trial, they would just give you a reserved smile and tell you that suspects arrested 3 to 4 years before you were still waiting for their day in court. Rehana, Jamal, Muhammad, and Sheikh Ahmed were all subjected to harsh interrogation methods to admit their involvement in a terrorist plot to place a female suicide bomber on an Indian airline flight on domestic soil. These confessions became facts in court. Rehana and Jamal were not financially able to hire lawyers to defend them in court. Nevertheless, they were more than lucky to have rich suspects accused along with them pertaining to the same case. If Sheikh Ahmed and Muhammad Khan were proven innocent, then Jamal Khan and Rehana Khan would automatically be acquitted. The same lawyers who were defending the two rich suspects were also the de facto defenders for Rehana and Jamal. Never before in the history of the India's justice system had a court case been brought to such a rapid conclusion as this one. The case of the female suicide bomber was tried and concluded in just a few short months. There were many reasons that led the Bombay courts to push the case to the top of the waiting list and render a judgment in 6 months. The first reason was that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia exercised immense influence over the trial, and there were rumors that the richest Arab country paid the Indian government off and or threatened to kick out all India's diplomats and close down the Indian embassy and consulate if the case wasn't resolved in favor of the accused and soon. Rumors also had it that the Saudi government would rule to deport all the thousands of Indians who were working in Saudi Arabia. The second reason was that the lawyers of the wealthy suspects paid a considerable size of money and bribed the judge of the High Court and the jury. In addition, the high-priced lawyers for the 4 suspects presented a good line of defense that no one could refute. Rehana Khan was a slum woman and uneducated. She could not possibly be involved in such a sophisticated plot to blow up an airplane. Furthermore, she was taking her 7-year-old daughter with her on the same plane and leaving her 5 sons alone with her parents and in-laws who could not work or provide for them. Also, if she wanted to kill herself so she could kill others, why did she want to kill her young daughter too? Jamal Khan wasn't a religious boy and had never been to a mosque his whole life. He smoked daily and drank alcohol occasionally, and the lawyers presented evidence obtained from the stores of non-Muslims such as Hindus and Sikhs where he often purchased cigarettes and liquor. The lawyers also provided proof of an ongoing love affair between Jamal and Rehana. The lawyers provided eyewitness testimony of the lovers kissing and embracing on the beachfront, in the restaurants and movie theaters. This scandalous affair between a widowed Muslim woman and a Muslim boy strengthened the arguments that neither of the two were committed Muslims. Muhammad Khan likewise was proven to have been engaged in an adulterous affair with his female lover. Testimony supplied by the management of the Oberoi Hotel verified the illicit relationship between him and the married Hindu woman, and he drank so much at times, he had to be helped back to his hotel room. He was also a chain smoker and was asked on several occasions to step outside and smoke because of the many complaints from restaurant guests. The lawyers presented thousands of unpaid bills and receipts from hundreds of hotels, restaurants, liquor stores, and nightclubs. This was strong evidence supporting the fact that he lived a wild, debauched lifestyle far from the lifestyle mandated by Islam. Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed was also proven to be an irreligious person and a playboy. Some of the hotel staff testified to this fact, and the lawyers brought forth their testimonies in open court. All the official papers that were found with Rehana Khan indicated that she was supposed to fly to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on a maidservant visa. The other three suspects verified this fact by their testimony in court, as well as employees of the passport office. Rehana Khan's papers were processed legally, and she did not obtain those papers through any illegal means. They were truly gifted to her by the wealthy business tycoon, Sheikh Ahmed. The strongest evidence that led the court to drop the terrorist charges and acquit all the four suspects was the return of Sheikh Ahmed to India. If he was the mastermind behind a terrorist plot, financier, and supplier of bomb-making materials, why did he return to India after his alleged accomplices were arrested? Added to that, the Indian police could not find the explosive device that the female suspect was supposed to have used to blow up the plane. 6 months in Bombay jail was the most painful experience Rehana had ever been through her entire life. During all the years of suffering while her husband was alive and after his death, she did not suffer as much as she suffered in jail. She was beaten, tortured, and denied basic human necessities. She was abused by the police and treated like a traitor by the female staff and other prisoners. The jailers beat her, insulted her, and sometimes spit in her face. They accused her of trying to blow up the Air India plane and kill innocent people. No one believed her when she pleaded her innocence. It was nothing short of a miracle she survived for 6 months in that treacherous environment among dangerous criminals and hostile tormentors. What troubled Rehana especially during her incarceration and made her spend sleepless nights and unbearable days was worrying about her children and her elderly parents. How were they going to survive without someone to help care for them? Who was going to be the breadwinner, and where would they get food to eat? She had left what little money she had with her parents, and she was planning on the day she got arrested to give them whatever money she had. Unfortunately, the police helped themselves to the money she received from her benefactor. She thought there was just a little misunderstanding and that she would be allowed to go home as soon as that little misunderstanding was cleared up. She never expected that she was going to be jailed for such a long period of time. What disturbed her conscience most of all was the fear that her little daughter might be raped at night by some of those lawless slum boys. She knew her elders would not be able to stop those boys if they broke in at night and attempted to rape her little daughter. She also knew that her slum neighbors would not come to the rescue of her precious child if she screamed for help. The slum dwellers were scared to death of Gondas. None of them would put their life at risk by coming between the Gondas and their intended victims. After her release, Rehana went directly to her slum. She found some of her little children had become beggars. 3 of her relatives had died. She lost her father, father-in-law, and mother-in-law. Only her old mother was still alive. Her mother told her that she was the one who sent her sons to the streets to beg in order to feed the family. The mother refused to allow Rehana's daughter to go to the streets for the fear of being raped at that young age by good-for-nothing men. On the day of their arrest, the police returned the daughter to her slum as soon as she was questioned and told them she was going with her mother on a trip to help her work in some people's houses and pick up some money on the streets. Rehana wept day and night for her family while she was in jail. She had no one to send them any messages to tell them what was going on. She learned from her tormentors that Jamal Khan had been arrested too on the same day she was apprehended. Before her arrest, Rehana was a simple-minded person with a pure heart. She hated no one more than her unjust arrest and the terrible cruelty she underwent. She began to hate with every bone in her body those responsible for the injustice that had been done to her and her dear ones. She wept bitterly thinking about the suffering and hardship her children and elders were having to endure without her. She wept twice as much when she learned the person who gave her the happiest days of her life was also accused falsely and thrown inside a filthy jail and knew he was being tortured just as much as she was. Rayhana never forgot her trip to Saudi Arabia. After her release, she took her mother, went back to the police station, and requested the return of her visas, tickets, passports, and money. The police inspector who had arrested her became belligerent and shouted he was going to arrest her and her mother if she didn't leave, and it would be better for him never to see her face again. Rayhana no longer had an attorney to represent her or make a formal complaint to get back what was rightfully hers. There was no one to fight for her rights against an unlawful and unforgiving system of wickedness. When the unscrupulous man of the law didn't return her travel papers, she concluded that her chance to go to the rich country of the Arabs had gone forever. Being left with no hope, Rayhana returned to the rich people's homes and began to work for them again, slaving for hours. Some of the families refused to give her work again because of her involvement in an alleged terrorist plot. During her long hours of working, Rayhana always remembered her lover, Jamal. She wondered whether he would be willing to accept her again after all the trouble he had endured because of her. She thought his only sin was loving her, and because of this he was arrested and jailed for helping her in her desire for a better life. She also did not expect the travel agency that had prepared her paperwork to ever be interested in helping her again. The old rich Saudi who so freely gave her the visas and tickets to paradise would not be interested in having her as a maidservant any longer. She believed she had caused so much trouble for him he would not ever wish to see India again or the ground she walked on. She saw him whenever there was a hearing in court along with the other 2 Indian suspects. Many weeks passed after Rayhana Khan was released from jail and allowed to return to her slum. Every day she got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, went to work in the homes of the rich, and she did not return to her slum until 9 o'clock in the evening. She had stopped her children from going to the local train stations and begging. Her daughter Ifat once again became the babysitter of her little brothers, cooked their food, and washed their rags. That same old sad cycle of her former life was repeating itself day in and day out. One day Rayhana returned at 9 o'clock in the evening and found a visitor waiting for her inside her slum. He was the last person on earth she thought she would ever see again. She did not know his name. She did not know how to speak his language, and she had no idea what language he was speaking. It was the Sudanese boy, Babakir al-Awar. How did he know where she lived? How did he in his tall height and stature manage to walk through those narrow lanes and ghastly slums? Rayhana was afraid to shake his hand when he offered his hand to her. She kept her distance away from him and continued to stare at him. She did not expect him to speak her language either. Nevertheless, her curiosity was tripled when she heard him speaking to her in broken Hindi. With much difficulty, she grasped some of what he was saying. She could understand the words visas, tickets, and Saudi Arabia. She even heard him mention the word passport. Nonetheless, Rayhana didn't trust him, thinking he was trying to get her alone and rape her. The color of his skin and African features made her distrust him all the more. Babakir repeated each sentence he spoke 10 times before Rayhana could understand what he was saying. What she understood was that Babakir wanted to give her the same papers she used to have and help her go to Saudi Arabia. Although she was afraid of him, she realized he was the only person who had come to look for her and offer her help. Neither her lover Jamal Khan nor the owner of the travel agency had come to look for her and offer her another chance at anything. She was afraid to be alone with this man she barely knew, but after much hesitation Rayhana agreed to meet the Sudanese boy on the following day at the bus stop that was not far from her slum. Babakir told her to meet him at 10 o'clock in the morning and not to bring anyone with her. Rayhana refused and told him she could not come alone and insisted she had to bring her little daughter with her. Babakir unwillingly accepted her condition and left. That particular night everybody in the tight-knit slum community manufactured up their usual run of back alley gossip. The black Negro boy came to ask Rayhana for sex. With the help of the Muslim and most holy woman of Allah, everyone's opinion of Rayhana evolved around her having sex on the street like dogs. Now this black African man showing up at her slum confirmed their opinions once again. Many Indians think Africans are very dangerous men and are notorious sex fiends. Sadly, any Indian girl seen walking with a black man in India is considered a prostitute. Well, let us not dwell for now in trying to analyze and refute these erroneous and racially biased preconceptions, but let us continue with the plans of Rayhana and Babakir to meet the next day. When Rayhana met Babakir, he took her to a restaurant and talked with her for a long time, being repetitive in his long-rehearsed Hindi. With quite some difficulty he tried to communicate to her that the same old Saudi who had provided her before with tickets and visas to Saudi Arabia was still interested in giving her work as a maidservant in his country. Babakir told her that the old Saudi wanted to know whether she was still interested in coming to his country. Before answering, Rayhana asked Babakir to tell her where the old man was. Babakir told her the old Saudi after his release had returned to his country. But, a week ago he phoned him in his hostel and requested he find her and tell her his offer still stands and the job was still hers if she wanted it. Babakir told Rayhana it took him a full week to find her slum. Rayhana then gladly accepted the offer on the same condition she had made previously, that she would need her daughter to come with her also to Saudi Arabia. Babakir promised he would advise her sponsor about her condition. That day the kind Sudanese boy did not allow the poor slum woman and her daughter to go until they agreed to have a meal with him at the restaurant. Then, he asked Rayhana to meet him again in a week at the same restaurant at the same time. He said he was going to contact her benefactor and inform him about her consent and condition, and at the end of 1 week, he would let her know his reply. Before we go any further, 2 important things need to be mentioned right away. Babakir was kicked out of the travel agency by Muhammad Khan's wife, who took over the business while her husband was in jail. It was her husband who asked her to fire Babakir. What is more, the number of the employees was reduced to 5. Muhammad's wife also fired 2 girls without giving them any reason for their being fired. The other employees could plainly see why his wife fired Bulbula Sheikh and Tabajum Sirajuddin. They were very beautiful and stiff competition for her husband's sexual pleasures. Although Mrs. Khan pretended to run the office and be the boss, the main person running the business was Ruxana Rehman. After his release from jail, Jamal Khan wanted to return to his work at Muhammad Tours and Travels, but under order of Muhammad Khan, his wife refused to hire him again. He was fired and was not entitled to receive any severance pay or benefits. Next, we need to mention quickly, after the trial was over, Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed returned to his country and swore by his Allah that his feet would never again touch the soil of the land of the accursed Hindu idolaters. He began to hate Hindus with a passion because the police inspector who tortured him during his interrogation was a Hindu. He recognized his religious affiliation by his surname, Shankaracharya. He knew that Shankar was one of the Hindu gods. Although he hated Hindus, Hindustan, and all Indians, Sheikh Ahmed never forget about Rayhana, and he was determined to get her by all means, even if it cost him his life. He had no one to trust in India except his old friend, Babakir al-Awar. After he came out of the hospital, he phoned his friend and apologized to him for the misunderstanding that terminated their long friendship. By the way, as soon as he returned to his homeland, Sheikh Ahmed went directly to the hospital. He was exhausted from the long trial and was being treated off and on from the brutal treatment he received in jail and hundreds of ailments and infections he contracted while there. Babakir suffered a lot after he was fired from his job. His struggles started all over again and he was having a very difficult time. Again, he was dependent upon his Sudanese friends to help him out, and they were not happy about his never-ending penniless condition. After his ever-mercurial friend called him and apologized for all the misunderstandings, some hope shone in his life once more. Sheikh Ahmed promised to send to him some money on a regular basis if he managed to find Rayhana and get her papers processed over again so she could come work for him. The old Saudi swore by Allah he would send him 15,000 rupees to start. He said to Babakir, the much-needed Indian maidservant was worth the money and expense, and he requested her services as quickly as possible. He would take care of everything and all the costs of reprocessing of her papers and documents. This time he said to Babakir, he did not want any filthy Indian to process her papers. He specifically mentioned them each by their names, namely, Muhammad Khan and Jamal Khan. He told Babakir neither of them should know of these new arrangements for Rayhana to fly to the kingdom of Tartarus. After some days had passed, Babakir was able to locate Rayhana Khan, and he called Sheikh Ahmed and presented him with the good news. To be extolled for his efforts and make Sheikh Ahmed feel overly indebted to him, Babakir recounted for him all the trouble he went through to locate his maidservant. He mentioned how he had to use Gondas to help him in locating her slum. As a matter of fact, Babakir would never have found Rayhana Khan if he did not get the assistance of an Indian because of his poor Hindi language skills and his ethnicity. He sought the help of a lawman to locate the slum of Rayhana. He bribed a Muslim police constable and asked him to direct him to the place of the Muslim woman who was falsely accused of the recent terrorist plot. His angle was that he was a foreign reporter from a Muslim country and wanted to conduct an interview for a cover story in a news article. He said further to receive sympathy from the Muslim constable that the mission of the article was to show to the outside world how infidels in the idolatrous Hindu nation of India wrongly accused an innocent, peace-loving and law-abiding poor Muslim woman. The Muslim constable, being moved by his love of Allah's chosen people, believed Babakir and promised to help him in finding Rayhana Khan. After 1 week of searching, the constable found out where Rayhana was living and took Babakir to her slum. Babakir thanked him, gave him some money, and asked him to leave. The reason being, he did not want Rayhana and her family to see him coming to their slum with a policeman. Sheikh Ahmed praised Babakir over and over that he almost started crying. He then told him he would be sending the work visa and ticket for Rayhana. Babakir mentioned the condition of Rayhana before she would travel to work as his maidservant. The old Saudi immediately agreed and said, bringing her daughter with her will be an additional blessing from Allah. Babakir did not suspect any ulterior motives on the part of his Saudi friend when in his dirty mind he praised his Allah for the 7-year-old daughter that would become heaven for him and hell for her.